he said what we're going to do is we're going to scale these things we're going to get them to happen federally, then they're going to be managed locally, and ideally they'll scale down to a point they're voluntary. So there was a mission to be voluntary on school vouchers and on negative income taxes, but there is just this reality of A to Z, and you know what, I think after you pass X, it gets very tricky on Y to Z in the final points. So it's a tough game to play, and he knew that, and it's tough to get the money, but there was some idealism there, but that's when you have a situation as bad as what you have, it's hard to handle. So I look at the Friedman approach versus the Rothbard approach, and going from A to Z on some issues is fine. If you want to market it a little different, but if you got rid of occupational licensing, the people who have the licenses are going to be the only ones in the industry, and the new people who pop up, they're going to get sourced out soon. And that is a good ringtone playing right now. What show is that from? What is that from?
My phone is crazy.
I feel like that's Better Call Saul. And here's the thing: if we legalize marijuana overnight, we're not going to have a problem. But that's another example right there. So that's another A to Z. But just going from A to Z is an issue by issue thing. If you said we're going to go from what we have today to minarchy, and we're going to lay off 13 million people overnight, congratulations, you've just created the second Civil War. There you go. And it's a situation where how do you market it, how do you handle it? And when it came to the Friedman approach, he said he wanted a more efficient military. To some extent I look at it, and I look at the Vietnam military to today's military, and it's kind of a trade-off. I mean, there's so many other factors, but it is more efficient, and maybe that has benefited us. We do have less injured soldiers today for the war. We do have less deaths and less casualties. So on our side, it did create efficiency, but sadly it didn't create efficiency on their side or make us better people. But with Milton Friedman, though, it's A to Z libertarianism, and I feel some issues it works, some issues it doesn't. And that's just the bulk of the debate here. And that's why I'm saying the Rothbard approach of just being the guys in the room saying end it, end it, end it, is never going to work. And I think the best example is this: Ron Paul versus Rand Paul. Ron Paul, great guy, like I said, my mega superhero, but in terms of what he did in the House, he never really got a bill through the House. Rand Paul has co-sponsored 80 to 100 bills. He's worked with everyone from Mitch McConnell to Cory Booker to Barbara Boxer to Ted Cruz and all of those in between. And he got Barack Obama to endorse criminal justice reform. He got Donald Trump to say, I'm going to support Rand Paul's repeal and replace plan. Rand Paul gets stuff done. And that's because he's going from A to B, where Ron Paul, I felt, went from A to Z. And it's just kind of a choice I think the liberty movement has to make. Are we going to allow the government to gradually grow as we just continue advocating A for Z and hoping something pops? Or are we going to try and get B passed? And looking at some countries, looking at some states, it looks like A to B does happen occasionally when you work hard enough at it. But that's why Milton Friedman's my man, and I'm going to have someone come up and say why he shouldn't be.
This is the left's criticism of Ron Paul. He never got a bill passed. Well, we have too many bills. We don't need any more. What we need is to have repeal. Look, in my view, who converted more people to libertarianism than any other person? Ayn Rand and Ron Paul. Ayn Rand, my generation, Ron Paul for this generation. Who did Rand Paul ever convert to anything?
Zero.
Well, I wouldn't say zero. Might be 2 or 3 people. Who knows? But I mean, to put Saint Ron down here and his son, who what did they say?
Pastor Ron.
The acorn went too far from the tree. I mean, Rand is not a deserving son of Ron. Rand's acorn went too far away from Ron's tree. I mean, Ron is magnificent. Ron and Ayn Rand together converted more people to libertarianism than any other 2 people. I would maybe put Milton Friedman 3rd and Murray Rothbard, I don't know, 10th or something, because Milton Friedman had a bigger megaphone than did Murray Rothbard. But Ron Paul is super duper, as even Charles Peralo says, and Rand Paul, he's the most libertarian senator we've ever had. But that's a pretty low barrier. There was no civil war in 1861. There was a civil war in Spain in 1936 because both sides wanted to run the whole country. There was a civil war in Russia in 1917 because the red and the whites both wanted to run the whole country. The South didn't want to run the North. The South just wanted to secede. And secession is part of anarchism. Because if the South can secede from the North, and Florida can secede from the South, and Miami can secede from Florida, and this neighborhood in Miami or Coral Gables can secede from Miami, and one single square block can secede from that, and then one individual can secede from that block, well, then we have anarchy. Anarchy, we're not really against government. We want 7 billion of them, and everyone will have his own government. That's another way of putting anarchy. That's another way of putting freedom. So it's a mistake to say that the Civil War existed in the U.S. in 1861. I attacked the negative income tax, and notice what Charles Peralo did. He changed the subject. He changed the subject. He didn't talk about the negative income tax. He talked about something very different, namely getting rid of welfare like that. I didn't mention that. That's an entirely different issue. Now, I applaud him. It's a good debating tactic, because if you're in trouble, change the subject. What do they tell lawyers? If the facts are against you, go with the law, and if the law is against you, go with the facts, and if they're both against you, scream, or change the subject. Well, he went to a good law school. He changed the subject. I wasn't talking about that. That's an entirely different issue. I was talking about the negative income tax. And Milton Friedman, genius politician that he was, wanted the negative income tax to replace all the other welfare programs. Guess what happened? Did it replace all the others? No, it just added to the thing. Plus, it gave a new impetus to welfare rights. With the negative income tax, I have a right to welfare because my income was below the cutoff point, and I have to get a negative tax, namely a subsidy. That's my right. God bless Milton Friedman for promoting welfare rights. That's all we need. I want you to bomb people better. More efficient bombing. Nowadays, yes, we've had fewer U.S. soldiers die because we do these, what do you call them? Drones. Well, isn't that great? Isn't that great from a libertarian point of view that U.S. soldiers are not dying as fast as they were as when you have boots on the ground? From a libertarian point of view, this is hardly something to brag about. He says, well, it's not so efficient from the recipients of the bombing. Well, yeah. They keep getting the smithereens bombed out of them, and this is libertarianism? This isn't even classical liberalism. Classical liberalism is the Ron Paul, not the Rand Paul policy of pulling all the troops back and having a very strong Coast Guard. Milton Friedman was a road socialist. I had a book out called Privatizing Roads and Highways, on the ground that some 35,000 people die every year on the roads, and it's not due to vehicle malfunction and driver error and drunken driving and speeding. It's due to the fact that the managers of the road, namely the government, can't manage their way out of a paper bag, and we don't have competition between different roads as to make different better rules of the road. For example, maybe instead of having a minimum of 40 and a maximum of 70, we should have in the left lane, everyone has to do 80, middle lane, everyone has to do 70, in the right lane, everyone has to do 60. Would that work better? I don't know, but it might. It's plausible. And yet, we don't have competition in roads because we don't have different road owners. Milton Friedman I was in a debate with my man Milton, and I accused him of being a road socialist. He didn't take too kindly to that. I'm not sure why, but he was favoring the present system of road socialism. Don't ask. Milton Friedman was a supporter of the commie Coase. Ronald Coase was a commie. Ronald Coase was worse than the commies. At least the commies had a theory of property rights. The bourgeoisie are bad, the proletariat are good, and give everything from the bourgeoisie to the proletariat. It's not a good theory, but it's a theory. You can't be too fussy nowadays. It's a theory of property rights. Ronald Coase has no theory of property rights. Let me spend a minute or two on Ronald Coase, because Milton Friedman was a big, big supporter of Ronald Coase, who won a Nobel Prize, as did Milton Friedman. See, suppose I'm having a dispute. What's your name with the MAGA hat?
Waldo.
Waldo. Waldo and Walter are having a dispute as to who owns the Make America Great hat. I say I own it, and Waldo says he owns it. Now, how would the non-Coasean, non-Friedmanite judge look at this? He would look at this in the past. He would say, well, do you have a bill of sale? And Waldo, of course, has one, or he has a picture of him wearing a month ago. He's got evidence that he owns that hat. And then the judge would ask me, do I have any evidence? I said, no. How would the Coasean-Friedmanite judge look at it? Would they look in the past and look at property rights? No, no, no. They would look at the future. And I would say Waldo is a drunken bum, and all he's going to do with that hat is get drunk better. He'll be more efficient at getting drunk. Whereas if I get the hat, I will create a new symphony orchestra, or whatever I'll do with the hat. It'll be wonderful. GDP will rise. Guess who Coase and Friedman would give the hat to? Give me that hat. See, I'm a Coasean. I've got the hat.
Tell me that.
Now, this is not a theory of property rights.
Yes, that's
This is because this is not a theory of property rights. This is an abnegation of property rights. I mean, the one who says that in the future he predicts that he'll raise the GDP more than the other guy. Ronald Coase never went over hats like this, but he'd go over if the cows are attacking the corn, should the corn guy have to build a fence, or should the cow guy have to build a fence? Obviously, from our point of view, the cow guy has to build a fence because his cows are initiating violence, trespass on the corn. But from the Coasean point of view, well, it depends upon the price of corn and meat. And guess what? The relative prices of corn and meat, what do? They fluctuate. Every day they go up or down. So every day the new plaintiff or the new defendant will win the case. That's not a theory of property rights, and that's Milton Friedman. Well, he didn't initiate it, but he was a big supporter of Ronald Coase, who did initiate this. And I regard that as, dare I use the word despicable or deplorable? That's a better word, deplorable. I've got other things on my list. One is that we're all Keynesians now. Milton Friedman was a Keynesian, but I'm going to hold off until we get to economics, because Milton Friedman was a Keynesian. I want to talk about that a little bit. One last point. He had this thing about neighborhood effect. Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Externalities, neighborhood effects. This is his reason for supporting education. Because if I'm educated, I'll benefit you, because you'll be a better voter, you'll be less likely to be a criminal, more likely to be a white-collar criminal, but that's another issue. And therefore, we should tax me to give you education. Well, the reductio ad absurdum of that is, right now I'm smiling at you, see? Smile. You give me money now because I made you happy by smiling. And guess what I did last night? I took a shower. You owe me money for soap. I mean, I'm trying to reductio ad absurdum on Milton Friedman's neighborhood effects nonsense. This is not property rights. This is not libertarianism. This is mishigas in Yiddish, craziness. This is just, and yet it's the mainstream economics all agree with Milton Friedman. And Charles Peralo's essays are, Murray Rothbard never accomplished anything, and Milton Friedman accomplished a lot. Well, it's true. Milton Friedman accomplished a lot because anytime he wanted to get on the New York Times editorial page, he could get on. He won the Nobel Prize. Murray Rothbard never won squat. Murray Rothbard wallowed at universities, not like the University of Chicago, much lower prestige places. So of course Milton Friedman got more accomplished than Murray Rothbard because Milton Friedman had the attention of the major media. Murray was dismissed as a kook and a weirdo.
You know, because the topic of the Trump cat came up again, I thought I would just walk up saying a well 2020 hat. Hopefully some people can adopt that. But you know, I know Liberty Hangout is live streaming this, so I give them permission to turn this into as many memes as they'd like. But okay, so I think the thing I will bring up is first off the negative income tax, because I was limited to a minute when I brought that up, so I didn't have much time to get into it. So now I would like to talk a little bit more about that. So why do I support the negative income tax? Because the current welfare state is an absolute joke. Currently right now there is, I believe, people who go on food stamps or go on welfare, I believe 75% of them, or 80%, will not be on them within 24 months. That's a good thing, they rebound. The problem is there is about 5 through 15% of people, depending on which state you're in, and they tend to be the same people generation after generation who use them, and it's a trap. You look at the current model of welfare, and it's a system where basically if you have a savings account, you're penalized. You get a job part-time, you're penalized. So we follow a negative income tax model where, let's say we're going to have on the first $40,000 of income, 25% tax. And that does not mean after $45,000 it has to be 25%. It could be 10%, it could be 1%, whatever. But the first $40,000 will be 25%. We go to that and we say, okay, so we're going to give everyone $10,000. Now on that 40%, you'll hit, when you hit $40,000, where your $10,000 you make an additional $30,000, you now are making $30,000 and you're going to pay $10,000. So you break even with the negative income tax model. That's what negative income taxes are. Now if you make $20,000, you're still going to get an additional gain, but you're still going to have a 25% direct tax on that. So that's just the negative income tax model. That's how it works. You can incorporate that into the plans overall. And from that model, it creates a system where you don't have the 5 through 15%. And there's been a couple of countries to try the negative income tax model, and they've seen some benefits over what the government currently has in our country. And there's been some states where they don't have the same penalties. They do make an easier system, and people are able to move. But the welfare system, I would say, is a model currently structured on the goal of keeping poor people and minorities in the same location. It's why the Bronx exists. Why do people who live in like rural area X or like Harlem stay there? Why don't they move to North Dakota? Why don't they move to a more prosperous area? It's because the welfare system keeps them pinned to one address. So that's what Milton Friedman was against, and that's what he really fought on. So he wanted to basically mobilize the system to work better. And economics is a science. There's experimentation. If the system doesn't work, then you go back at the books, maybe say completely eliminate welfare. But at least try it. And the negative income tax model, it's something much more easy to stomach over keeping welfare. If you try and completely get rid of welfare, you're going to have riots. You're going to never get it done. At least this model could solve the 10 through 12% issue, and then the rest of the people using it will only be the habitual users. And then also you have things such as inflation going up, not raising it. You have plans to gradually cut the spending over time. You go into regional division. The goal is to scale down, and that is the Friedman approach right there. But that's definitely the negative income tax, and I'm definitely going to say all out the liberty movement should support it the same way we should support school choice. It's not perfect, but it's B. And it's going to be a long way to get to Z, but currently Y is not an option, Z is not an option, go to B. This is the type of compromise. The next thing is Ron Paul versus Rand Paul. We look at Ron Paul versus Rand Paul, has Ron Paul been able to get more people into libertarianism than Rand Paul? I'm going to say yes. I don't think anyone can deny that. Granted, Ron Paul had 3 presidential campaigns. Rand had 1 where I don't think he was even trying. But, Ron Paul definitely achieved more. But we have to look at legislation. We have to look at who did more in the Senate. Rand Paul has a bill which could actually get passed in the next year regarding criminal justice reform. He has the most senior senator, Pat Leahy, on his side. And if that happens, the government can no longer do civil asset forfeiture. We would lose mandated minimum sentencing by the federal government onto states for drug crimes. It would probably free, in the next year, 50,000 people if it passes. And it has Cory Booker, it has Rand Paul, it has Pat Leahy, it has even Ted Cruz. It could work. So I'm just following that model where if we go to a pragmatic approach, there are benefits and losses. And also, I think one issue with Ron Paul was maybe being so pure and so hyped up was part of the issue. Maybe he shouldn't be treated as the Messiah, but I'm being told I'm out of time, so I hope you enjoyed my endorsement of negative income tax, and thank you. Next topic.
All right, finally, we're going to go over economics, and we have an economist in the building, and so this should be interesting because it might pin the Chicago school versus the Austrian school, so I look forward to this. And Charles, you're up first as always.
Oh, I'm up first, always.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to say to some extent this debate, just looking at a couple words here from Dr. Block, where he referred to Milton Friedman as more influential than Murray Rothbard because he did have that larger megaphone as a good thing. And I think there's a couple of points I could say I've done fairly well here. But, going up against, on economics, Walter Block, who's a great economist, I'm definitely at a disadvantage here. So it's basically like I'm the kid in the wheelchair going up against Michael Phelps in a swim contest. Or actually, no, my bone density because I'm the black man going up against Michael Phelps. So we might have a little bit of a disadvantage here. So I guess the topic of economics, we could talk about Milton Friedman versus Murray Rothbard. And really where I think we've discussed this, Dr. Block, would you say on regulatory policy Milton Friedman was great, bless his heart? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from him, so bless his heart there. We seem to definitely have some disagreements on spending overall, and what's the best approach to handle spending. So on regulatory policy, you can say Rothbard and Friedman agree, A to Z regulatory policy right away. Spending policy, not so much. Now, then we get to the big thing, which is currency, money, and that's probably the big debate between Rothbard and Friedman overall. And when it comes to fiat currency versus gold, government currency versus market currency, I'm actually going to say I agree with Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard more than Milton Friedman on this front. I think that we should have voluntary currency. I do think there might need to be some controls by the government put in place, but I do think if we were to try and move to a basket currency or something where we have the market open up, they offer gold, eventually everybody goes back to gold standard, the price of gold grows up over the next 10 years, and we're using it, that would probably be a good model. But when it comes to the Friedman approach and the Rothbard approach, I look at what they proposed, and I agree with Rothbard more. I feel more in my heart on there. But once again, it's A to Z, and which one has the slightest chance of passing? It's B, and that's the Friedman approach. And I'm just looking at it saying, what was the Friedman approach to currency? So we could talk about trade, we can talk about inflation, we can talk about a lot of things which he did absolutely 100% right with Milton Friedman. But what he said and what he recommended is we need to have a currency model where we cap how much currency is printed to GDP growth or to population growth, and ideally we get into a structure where we have stable currency that does not get affected by banking interest rates. It will not get affected by trade. It will not get affected by savings. It will not get affected by the economy much. And it will create a model where we don't have inflation or deflation, because deflation is bad if you have a loan, and inflation is bad if you have money. So Friedman's approach is ideally stability. Now, does it work? I would say in terms of where I'd like to be in terms of currency, we're currently at a D-, and that D- is because Bernie Sanders is not present, and we've not spent rogue yet. Milton Friedman's approach, I would say, is probably a C+, a B-. I think the economic effects would be bad but not terrible. We can see that with some nations that already do currency caps where they have a better situation. And I would say Murray Rothbard's views on this, Ron Paul's views on this, the Austrian school's views on currency in nature are an A+. It's just where do you get there? And I think the Friedman approach is simply better. And this is another thing. Do you want to go down the alphabet, or do you want to try going from A to Z? And I don't think that's going to happen. The next thing is with Austrian economics versus Chicago school, there's some talks about interest rates, basically freedom of interest rates. Once again, I actually in nature agree with the Austrian school on this. I agree with the Austrian school on more issues. It's just, once again, political pragmatism. With the Austrian school, we are like, who are we? The Austrian school. Where are we? The loser bin. How do we get out of it? I'd say the Chicago school is how we get out of it. So I would like and I mean, I look at it, let's just go for an example of what percent of colleges actually teach Austrian economics or recognize it. There's Dr. Bloch School or Loyola, there's University of Michigan, there's NYU, and not much more. So I think with Austrian economics, you know what, I'm going to say it's correct for the most part. The only times I really disagree with it are when I see Peter Schiff pretend to be an economist when he's not, and then try and sell you gold. Or when they say, oh, we predicted all the recessions. There's kind of some false pride there, but I'm looking at it like Austrian school is not that bad, but it's just in the next few years, I mean, we've got Trump as president, and the left is definitely not offering us anything that great with Liz Warren. So let's dance Chicago. Let's go over there and dance the Milton for a while, and that's all I'm saying on that front. So I guess that's the point, and I don't think it's, once again, an A to Z type deal. But thank you, and here you go, Dr. Bloch.
I've got some job advice for Charles Peralo. He should apply to Berkeley to become a dean. Why do I say he'd make a good dean at Berkeley University? Because he said we shouldn't get rid of welfare because there'd be riots. And what did the Berkeley dean say? That when Milo Yiannopoulos came, we had to make sure he doesn't speak because there'd be riots. Well, if there are riots, I mean, Donald was magnificent. He said, maybe we should give Berkeley a little less money. Isn't that magnificent? This is sort of like the heckler's veto, and he's supporting that, and I find that problematic. I'm glad to welcome him to Austrian economics. The main two places for Austrian economics in graduate school are now Texas Tech and George Mason University. There are other places beside Loyola, but in Europe there's Guido Holtzman at Angers, and then there's, what's his name in Spain? Jesus Huerta de Soto in Madrid. There's Matt Mackay in Poland. There's a new place in England. There are places where Austrian economics is taught, but I would say that 1% of there is also Marroquin in Guatemala. There was something in Argentina, I think. If you're interested in this, email me and I'll give you every place where there's Austrian economics. And I would say Austrian economists are about 1% of all economists, up from 0.0001 when Murray started. Look, Milton Friedman had this thing called Free to Choose. It was not so bad. It was a series of 10 vignettes, Milton Friedman here, Milton Friedman there, Milton Friedman in Hong Kong, Milton Friedman at a sweatshop, whatever. And then it would be followed up by a little bit of a debate. Thomas Sowell was in there sometimes. He was very good. Free to choose is a very good emblem for economics. Whenever we were free to choose money, look, why do we need money in the first place? The reason we need money in the first place is there's this thing called the double coincidence of wants. I have a chicken and I want a pickle. Do you know the odds of finding someone with a pickle who wants a chicken? Very, very low. It's the double coincidence. The odds of finding someone who's got a pickle and wants a chicken, who got what I want and wants what I've got, zero. So what I do is I take my chicken and I sell it for something that everyone wants. Salt or sugar or fish hooks or clamshells or something like that. And now there's a competition between monies. Bananas wouldn't be a good money for obvious reasons. Diamonds are not a good money because if you break up a diamond in half, you lose most of the value of it. Cement wouldn't be a good money because it takes too much to buy or sell anything. Guess what when people were free to choose what they chose? I'll give you a hint, it begins with a G. Gold. Milton Friedman was an inveterate hater of the gold standard. How do you reconcile that with free to choose? Before I said Mr. Peralo contradicts himself. Well, he's in good company. Milton Friedman contradicts himself. On the one hand, free to choose. On the other hand, gold is evil. Why is gold evil? Because you have to dig it up. Milton Friedman is a central planner. He's trying to say, well, the GDP will be higher if we have fiat currency. Gold is sort of an insurance policy against the runaway inflation. I mean, we have locks on doors, even though if no one was a criminal, we wouldn't need them. Well, we need gold because there are criminals in Washington, D.C. and in the Fed creating inflation, creating hyperinflation in Germany. And so how do you reconcile this? You don't. Another point. Milton Friedman is a Keynesian. There are two types of Keynesians. What the Keynesians believe is the economy is sort of like on a road, and it keeps veering off into unemployment or inflation. And you need a Fed to sort of steer the wheel of the economy, make sure it doesn't veer this way, doesn't veer that way. That's Keynesian. The difference between the monetarist Keynesians and the fiscalist Keynesians is the steering wheel should be either monetary policy or fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is taxing and spending. Monetary policy is how much money do we create. That's the only difference. Paul Samuelson, another Nobel Prize winner, quoted Milton Friedman as saying, "We're all Keynesians now." Milton Friedman said that. We're all Keynesians now. You don't find Murray Rothbard saying anything like that. I mean, Murray would die first before saying that. I asked Milton Friedman this, and he said, well, Paul Samuelson misquoted me. What I really said was, when it comes to actual policy, there's a grave difference between us and the fiscalist Keynesians. But when it comes to the tools of analysis, we're all Keynesians now. Well, the tools of analysis are what determines what the public policy issue is, or what the public policy recommendation is. So he's a Keynesian on the much more important thing, namely the tools of analysis. Namely, the car is veering off one way or the other, whereas the Austrians say, the car is fine, it's the government that pushes us this way or that way. So on economics, Murray Rothbard worked for many years in Brooklyn Polytech, which is an engineering school. I once substituted for him. I had the honor of being Murray's substitute in his class. They were all a bunch of engineers, bright guys, but they weren't really interested in economics. And then he was at UNLV, where they're good at basketball. Whereas Milton Friedman was at Chicago, which is one of the most preeminent schools in the whole world. But this is the way we've been treated. When Mises came over to the U.S. When he was 61 years old, in the 40s somewhere, in the 50s, I forget when it was, maybe in the early 60s, he couldn't get a job anywhere. This is Ludwig von Mises. He couldn't get a job in academia. You know, we say that academia is a wholly owned subsidiary of the left. Well, the economics department is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Keynesians and Chicagoans. So of course Austrians are denigrated and ignored. I've been very lucky to get a job at Loyola, which is not Harvard. If there were any justice, Murray would have been at Harvard or MIT, or even Hayek couldn't get a job in the economics department of Chicago. And guess who blackballed Hayek from the economics of Charles Buddy? Milton Friedman and George Stigler and the gang said that Hayek wasn't an economist. Why? Because he wasn't a math jock. He was not an economist. I mean, that's the way they look at economics. They don't look at economics as economics. They look at it as just sort of math and stat. Even Hayek was relegated to the Committee of Social Thought, which is, you know, not the mainstream economics department in Chicago. And that's Hayek, who won a Nobel Prize, and guess which field? I'll give you a hint. It begins with an E. He won a Nobel Prize in economics, and he wasn't good enough for the Chicago Economics Department. Now look, Chicago is a very high, prestigious place, but he won a Nobel Prize, and he couldn't get a job there. So, you know, Charles, his screed, and getting back to me as his professor, and I'm marking the exam. Yes, Murray Rothbard never got anything accomplished compared to Milton Friedman, because Milton Friedman was in the American Economic Review, which is the most prestigious economics journal. Murray Rothbard got in there once or twice, or maybe 5 times, but he wasn't a regular. Murray Rothbard was at Brooklyn Poly and then at UNLV. Milton Friedman was in Chicago. So that's why he didn't do too well. Now, let me return a little bit to the screed that I'm going to be editing or marking the exam of. Chris Cantwell is a fat loser. That's not the way you write reasonable things. He talks about creepy, overweight, middle-aged guys.
Yeah.
I would say creepy, overweight, old guys. And then, you know, he was talking about who's going to win this debate, and he was saying that he's not an economist. How about the follically challenged? He's not follically challenged. He's got a full head of hair. He's younger and prettier than I am. You and I can identify on this issue. Let me talk about other things from this screen here. Austrian school isn't a success. Let me talk about this guy, Sherwin Rosen. Sherwin Rosen was a professor at Chicago economics. He wasn't as famous as Milton Friedman, but he was a follower of Milton Friedman. He was a full professor at Chicago, which means high prestige. And he wrote an article, why is it that Austrian economics is wrong and that the mainstream is right? And you know what his answer was? That the mainstream outnumbers the Austrian about 99 to 1. Ergo, therefore, they're right and we're wrong. You know, at one time everyone thought the earth was flat and that the sun revolved sun revolved around the earth, and 99% of the people thought that. Doesn't make it right. So what me and my co-authors did, we tried to reductio ad absurdum on Sherwin Rosen, and we said, whenever there's a debate between Austrians and mainstream, he who publishes last is right. Now this is obviously ridiculous, because the mainstream might have said, well, the Austrian criticism of me wasn't worth replying to. Or maybe he died before he could reply. Shut up. I wish I had failed him when just give me another minute on this, okay?
Go for it.
Do you object to one more minute for me?
I do not object.
Okay, thank you. So what happened is we got a list of every debate between Austrians and neoclassicists, and we got about 150 debates, and we won 90 of them, and they won about 60 of them. So this was an attempt to do a reductio ad absurdum. The whole thing is ridiculous. There is no objective way of saying just because they outnumber us, they're right and we're wrong. You have to get at what the truth is.
I say we go to Q&A.
Okay. Okay. Can I get like 1 minute?
Charles has 1 minute, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Yeah, just 1 minute. I just want to point out that, you know, when you called Milton Friedman a Keynesian, Paul Krugman's nose started bleeding. But I just wanted to touch on the Chris Cantwell point very, very briefly. The Chris Cantwell line was done in my second article, and that was because he talked about my first article and referred to me as a whiny cock, and then also said that when I brought up one point about slavery, he said, well, maybe we should go back to that because they were in line back then. So I had some reasons to be angry with Chris Cantwell, but I did see that debate with him and Adam Kokesh, and I will disregard my first statement, he is no longer fat. The second statement, where I call him a loser, I will probably still stand with that. Thank you. Just had to put that out there.
All right, great. Do we have any questions in the audience? Peter.
I got a question for Mr. Peralo.
Wait. Come up here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Here you go, buddy. Say your name and where you're from.
My name is Peter. I'm from Miami. And my question for Mr. Peralo is, you say Friedman was better than Murray because his pragmatism accomplished more. Looking at where we are today, it seems things are not necessarily any more libertarian than before. So in hindsight, what did Friedman accomplish, and was it worth compromising? And if so, at what point in your efforts to gain more support and influence do you stop watering down libertarianism?
Okay, good question on the
You want to get in the camera?
Oh, yeah. Oh, the camera was pointed. Can I have that mic back, that one? Okay. Does this mic work okay? Okay,
Turn this one on.
I think they both work now.
Okay. Okay, so that was a good question. Regarding that point on Milton Friedman and what he achieved and is the world more libertarian today, well, I mean, he's been dead for about 12 years, so there's a bit of time overlaps with that. But I would say Milton Friedman did indeed benefit the world. You look at the free trade, you look at the expansion of free trade and the benefits that has had on society. And that's Milton Friedman right there. You look at changes to monetary policy where we no longer have rogue inflation, that's Milton Friedman right there. You look at a lot of regulatory policy. Before Friedman, you had the Nelson Rockefeller Republicans, and you had some very, very minor free market Republicans. And the free market Republicans have skyrocketed. There has been some talks there has been deregulation happen in certain sectors, not many, but some. And then also we have to look at Milton Friedman's influence and realize this is well past America. He is the world's economist, not just America's economist. And we go to Chile. There were so many reforms that happened there where he had to work with some very nasty people. And you look at Chile's whole economy, and it is on, I would say, European standards in terms of where it is in terms of GDP compared to the rest of South America. And that's Milton Friedman for you right there. You look at Hong Kong and their entire economic structure, what was happening there, how he researched it, that's Milton Friedman right there. So there's no question in my mind he made this world a better place. Now, once again, it's one man, so you really have to just factor that in. So I would say that influence in all the global trade policies, which has skyrocketed our economy, not having rogue inflation, not having a draft, even though he had to say some things to shake some people his way, school choice in several countries, welfare reform, and the flat tax being done in 17 countries, I would definitely say he's had a positive impact. Now, when do you stop watering down the message? I don't think you stop watering down the message. I don't think the message has really been watered down that much. You look at Rand Paul and Gary Johnson, they both called to cut the government by over 20%. They both were anti-minimum. Gary Johnson, who people say, oh, he's a Democrat. I've never heard of a Democrat go on Yahoo Business where the entire audience is going to be young Bernie supporters and say, I want to abolish the minimum wage and the corporate income tax. With Rand Paul, it was the same thing. So I just look at that front, and I don't think the message is watered down. I just think that there's a level of extremism that's become a little weird. But
I wanted to comment on that as well. I certainly support what Charles said about Chile. It wasn't so much Milton Friedman, it was more the Chicago boys, for which he gets credit, namely a bunch of young Chilean kids went up to the University of Chicago, got a PhD there, went back to Chile, and moved the whole country in a free enterprise direction. And the left boycotted Milton Friedman forever because of that. They said he was in favor of Pinochet's murderous regime, which he had nothing to do with.
there were no helicopters with Friedman.
And what Friedman also said is, I went to Red China to get them to, and none of the lefties objected to that. The question comes to my mind, suppose Milton Friedman had never been born, and somehow David Friedman had been. Don't ask me how that would happen, but that happened. We erase Milton Friedman from history. Would we be better off or worse off? I think we'd be worse off without him. I think on net benefit, he was a positive source. All the time I call him a commie, but I'm only half serious. He wasn't a real commie. He was just a quasi-commie. But on net balance, he was a positive influence. He did very, very good things. He did very, very bad things. I think the good things outweighed the bad things. But to compare him to Murray Rothbard, I mean, Murray was just magnificent. Murray, he was not a cultist, as I've tried to say. He created whole bunches of students. I'm one among them. Murray never watered down anything. And we need the banner of freedom to be upheld high so that people can repair to it. The freedom that Milton Friedman is supporting is quasi, semi-demi freedom, but still positive.
He's a democratic communist.
Does anybody else have any questions? Robert Fernandez? Name and where you're from.
Well, I think you already said my name, Robert Fernandez.
Yes.
This question is more for Walter Bain. Lars knows me extremely well. He knows I'm far more in the ANCAP sector, even though I consider myself a borderline minarchist ANCAP. I'm a business owner that pretty much, of course, in business we all have our ups and downs. People, have issues that people sometimes don't want to pay, things of that sort. This is where my minarchist ideals kick in. I would like to have Walter's opinion about when you have to do resolutions, mitigation, things of that sort, and you have the client that say you mitigate the case and things of that sort, and it's their fault that they have to pay resolution, things of that. Where is it going to land in an ANCAP mindset that they actually, voluntarily pay the person that resolution and not just try to back out of it?
What's a resolution?
Like, for example, I'm in a situation that I have to put a lawsuit against a client because we set a contract, we said we were going to do the job, we came through the job, payment hasn't come through, deposits, things of that sort. What would be the ANCAP way of trying to resolve that issue without getting the courts involved in things of that sort?
Thanks. Now I understand what you mean. The way I answer this question is I ask you to think of 5 people. A, B, C, D, and E. 5 people. Alan, Bob, Charlie, David, Eddie, whatever. A, B, C, D, and E. A and E get into it. A was supposed to paint E's house. He didn't paint it right, and E says you didn't paint it right, and A says, I did too. Something like that. And then now there's no government. There's just private defense agencies. So A goes to B, since A and B are close, and B is a court. And A says to B, will you take my case? And B says yes, which means that A has to sign a thing to be bound by what B says. And B also has a police department that will enforce it. And then A invites E to come to the B court. And E says, what, the B court? That's your brother. I'm not going to the B court. Come to the D court. D is closer to E. And he signs up with the D court, and he's bound to agree to whatever the D court says. And neither one will go to the other court. And now there are 4 options. Both can agree with A. B and D can agree with A, in which case the case is over, because A and E have agreed to agree with whatever B and D said, and B and D both go for A, or they go for E. So those are the simple cases. Now, a weird case might be that D agrees with A, even though they're far apart, and B agrees with E, even though they're far apart. Let's forget about that. Let's now suppose that B agrees with A, and D agrees with E. Now, David Friedman, not Milton Friedman, David Friedman and Murray Rothbard, I'm getting this from them, I'm channeling them on this. What they both said is there are 2 kinds of courts, private courts. There are bandit courts and legitimate courts. Legitimate courts have anticipated that this might one day happen. Look, you're a judge, and you are both legitimate courts, and you agree that one day you might be on opposite sides. And what are you going to do? Remember C? I didn't mention C yet. You go to C. And whatever C says, you're obligated to do, because you've agreed that C is a good guy, is reliable. I had this friend who was an electrical engineer at Stanford, and companies that deal with computers and electrical things, what they do in the contract is they say, if there's any dispute, we'll go to this guy. Why? Because this guy's got a reputation of being a good judge, and even if you lose, he'll say something that shows that he understands what he's doing. He's a nerd, he understands, and it's a complicated case. So if B and D are legitimate courts, they go to C and that's it. Now suppose B is a legitimate court and D is a bandit court. Bandit courts say my way or the highway. Does the present system work perfectly?
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. I mean, nowadays the judges are picked on God knows what basis. Under the free enterprise system, they would be picked on base of probity and reputation and things like that. So that would be the 2-minute version of how it would be solved.
Thank you. Walter, can you take a picture with my buddy Peter? He's leaving.
I'll answer that. My wife at my parents' house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go for it.
It's time to get the people to go to sleep.
Well, I'm just going to give one big little thing on that whole stance. When it comes to courts and the ideas of how anarcho-capitalism relates to the courts, I'm going to say there's not a very clear answer on that front now, which is why I say anarcho-capitalism to some extent is, I believe, aggression itself, and I think it will lead to just many micro-governments popping up. I just don't think you can fully support a system where the results are theoretical in a sense. I don't think, and I feel like anarcho-capitalism and voluntarism is at this point it's a philosophical idea, something with lack of proof behind it. We don't know what the exact constructs of it are, and I think that's just the full answer to the courts. It's just like a hard thing to answer. The current system's not that good, but the other system being mentioned is kind of a wild card. So it's like, I guess, take your chance on that front. But
anybody else have questions?
Questions or comments?
Comments.
Matt Bymaster from Palm Beach.
You want to get in front of the camera?
Okay. My question is for Charles, and we can all agree that we're trying to get to Z.
Yeah.
And at some point, we have to agree that we don't have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
When it comes to insolvency, if there's no bids in the market, when confidence runs out for government. So, what do you think about coming towards the future, and with insolvency, with the government saying it on its own end that it could happen in 2032 or 2064, depending on what program you're looking at? At some point, you have to say extreme measures may be actually required.
okay, are you asking me, do I think the government's going to end in a certain point?
Well, I'm kind of saying you can sit there and have this step-by-step process that you're trying to get to Z that might take 50 years, 100 years, whatever you're going to go for. But when it comes to ANCAP, it's kind of an immediate go to Z and a process of as of today.
Okay. Well, first off, I think to some extent we already have anarchy to a degree in society. I think that anarchy is just the nature of humans reacting. And like I said, if you told 99% of Hillary supporters get rid of the government or live with Trump, they would live with Trump. And there is some, I guess, coercion of sorts where people do go with the masses on that front. Now, your real question is like A to Z, and would you want to wait 50 years? If I were to say 50 years until we can get some sort of minarchy that's stable, I don't think we would have to wait 50 years for that. I think if we were to introduce a plan, which is kind of what John McAfee proposed in his presidential run, and it said, okay, we're going to basically pay people to not show up to work, and we did that for the majority of the government. I mean, we probably have a lot of issues with them wanting to keep that situation for quite a while, but I think we would peacefully be able to lay off quite a few federal workers from that. I think regulatory policy, a minimum wage, FDA, we can in most cases go from A to Y or A to Z overnight. And regarding anarchy from A to Z, I do think it could be an A to Z type of deal, but the fact that we don't have it now just presents the idea that humanity might not be ready for it. And it does create this idea that I've talked about before in some articles I've written, where government might be the horse and carriage. And anarchy and anarcho-capitalism, volunteerism, that could be the car to humanity. But I think that is more of a technological discussion. That's 3D printing, that's robotics, that's solar energy, that's drones. That's a lot of things where you're going to take government services that are seen as essential and eliminate them. And that's something where it's like, I do think there could be a chance we do have a fully volunteer society, but it's not going to be spread around through taxation as theft means. It's just going to come about through, I think, natural situations through technology and through business. And in the meantime, we should engage in practical political arguments and saying, hey, we have 2 million people currently in jail, and I believe 60-70% of them are in jail because of drugs on their own choices. Let's free those guys first. Let's do that. Let's stop bombing other countries. Let's be nice to those 20 million people across the border who are working in farms, and we treat them as second-class citizens because they came here without some stupid visa. Let's get rid of this spending because, you know, it's just a bunch of people sitting there in some tower that are doing nothing. So that's what I'm saying on that front. But could anarchy come? Could we hit Z? Yes, but probably not from politics ever.
The way you started, you said we all agree that we want to get to Z. And Charles said yes. He lied.
Oh,
He doesn't want to get to Z.
we have
At least-
different Z.
at
We have a
least-
different alphabet, doctor.
He doesn't want to get to Z because he supports Milton Friedman, and he even said he doesn't want to get to Z in many cases. For example, I don't know, private education. Milton Friedman never said he wanted to get to Z. Milton Friedman doesn't want to get to the gold standard. Milton Friedman doesn't want to get to Z in many, many other areas. So it's false to say, yes, we all want to get to Z. Milton Friedman doesn't give evidence that he wants to get to Z. Second point, I don't believe we're going to get to Z in the next 50 years. I don't believe we're going to get there in the next 500 years. I've written a lot about sociobiology. Sociobiology is the theory of why we are the way we are. And it says the reason we are the way we are is because of what it took to live and leave children into the next generation 1 million years ago when we were in the cave or the tree. For example, we're all afraid of snakes. Nobody's afraid of a bathtub. Milton Friedman died from a bathtub. Taking a shower, he's 92. He slipped, fell, hit his head, and on the way to the hospital he died. He was killed by a bathtub. Many, many more people are killed by bathtubs like that than are by snakes. And yet us, if we saw a big snake going here, I'd be scared. Whereas if I saw a bathtub, I was in a motel last night, they had a bathtub, macho here, I wasn't afraid of the bathtub. Well, why is this? The reason is because 1 million years ago, being afraid of the bathtub conferred you no advantage over anyone else in terms of leaving more progeny. Whereas not being afraid of a snake conferred you a lot of disadvantages, and being afraid of a snake conferred you advantages. If you went over and pat the snake and say, "Are you a nice snake?" you probably didn't leave as many children. So I wrote an article on this, and what I said is the reason we are not libertarian, the reason we get 1% or 3% or whatever it is because we are not hardwired for free enterprise. Because 1 million years ago, when we were in the caves or the trees, there was an advantage for being nice to each other, benevolence. If you're my tribesman, we're in the cave or the tree, and you get sick this week and I help you, next week I get sick and you help me, our tribe survives. This other tribe with the same opposable thumb, the same strength, the same brain capacity, doesn't help each other, they don't live. We descend from people who helped each other, so we're hardwired to help each other. If one of us here or even out in the hall suddenly keeled over, we would call a hospital. We would be very disturbed by that. I get my students, sometimes I mention Katrina, and we talk about price gouging. Oh, price gouging is evil. Look, there were two ways that we could be helped in New Orleans when we had Katrina. One was benevolence. Somebody comes from Montana with a whole truckload of orange juice quarts. That's benevolence. The other way to help is we allow the prices of orange juice to rise, and now people make a profit by bringing us orange juice or baby diapers or whatever it is. But people were horrified to allow prices to rise. Why? Because they were hardwired against this. So I think that libertarianism is not going to succeed. So why do I do it anyway? Because it's the only thing to do. It's the only way to promote justice. I'm a social justice warrior. I want to promote justice even though we're not going to win. I don't care whether we win or not. I mean, it'd be nice to win, but I'm going to do it anyway. I devote my life to promoting liberty even though I don't think we're going to win, because what else is there to do for a decent person? Third point, he says we mistreat Mexican workers. We don't mistreat Mexican workers. That's a lefty mistake. Look, they don't have hot and cold water. And the lefties, what's his name?
Gary Johnson.
Not Gary Johnson. That Mexican-American unionist. They got some award. Oh, I forget the name of him. He was saying we shouldn't allow Mexican workers in because the growers mistreat them. And there's not hot and cold running water. But the point is that in the free enterprise... I'm sorry?
That was the United Farm Workers.
Yeah, what's the head...
Chavez, I think.
That's it.
Something Chavez.
Chavez was the head of the... Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez is a Mexican-American union leader who doesn't want Mexican workers to come in and lower the wages of his union workers. So he and all the lefties, Jane Fonda and the gang, are saying that, and Charles is buying into this nonsense, saying they're mistreating them. No, they're not mistreating them. If they were mistreating them, they wouldn't come up here year after year after year. Every activity in the free enterprise system is mutually beneficial in the ex ante sense. You all bought a pair of shoes for 100. You valued those shoes more than 100 when you bought them. The guy who sold you the shoes valued the shoes as less than 100 when he sold it to you. When those when the Mexican workers come up to California or wherever, Oregon, they come up there voluntarily. They don't go down. The growers don't go down there with a gun and say, "If you Mexican don't come up here and work, I'll shoot you." They come voluntarily. From this, we can deduce, if we're good economists, that they value what they're getting in California more than what they're getting in Mexico. And it's the same with sweatshops. And here he's saying that we mistreat them. That's lefty nonsense.
I would just like one quick rebuttal on the idea that about what I said regarding illegal immigration, how we treat them. I didn't say we treat them poorly. I said our government does. I meant to say our government does, and by not giving them access to citizenship where they can't buy. I mean, granted, they don't have to pay taxes currently, so that might be a plus, but they currently cannot go out and buy health care. They currently can't legally rent property. I think the government definitely does treat them poorly. I don't think people do treat them poorly, though. I think most Americans are very kind to them when they don't have their Make America Great hats on. I'm looking at you.
I misunderstood. Thanks for the correction.
Does that mean that he is not a lefty?
Not on this point.
Okay. That's great. Okay, we're going to have to close it up because, Walter, you have a flight to catch, and as much as I would like to kidnap you for all of us, like a real kidnap, not the fake ones that some people say that claim that
they're... We have to do one more thing before we end, and that is we have to shake hands in front of the camera.
Shake hands? Yes. Wait, let's do that one more time.
I'll get the hat now?
There we go.
Well, I want to give a special thanks to two people here. We started in 2013, February, I think was our first event. 2012, I was thinking, hey, I want to do this. I'm not crazy about the whole politics. My views are not auspicious when it comes to the political process. And so I figured, let's kind of like influence people in another way. Let's do it in an intellectual way. So I began this book club. And we started off reading Man, Economy, and State. When I say we, it was probably like 2 out of, let's say, 13 of us. So I was like, okay, well, this is a difficult book. So let's try to tackle this in a different way. Let's try to influence people in another way. So we started inviting people. It began, oddly enough, on the phone, on speaker. We started with Alexander Snicker, which ran for governor?
Senate. U.S. Senate.
U.S. Senate. Thank you, Robert. He is the wonk of the group, Robert is. So he was our first guest, and then we slowly built up, and we had Skype interviews. And, we had some big names. We had a lot of guys from Mises and, free marketeers. Then, we just kept growing and growing. We formed an alliance with America's Future Foundation. And, well, we've done so much since. We won the best chapter last year in the country for America's Future Foundation. So, I'm very proud of that. And we have had Lawrence Reed, the president of FEE, come down, fly and speak to us. He's a very influential free marketeer guy. We're going to have Wednesday David Knott, the president of Reason, known as Reason Magazine.
Where?
I'll give you the details later. And that, we're also going to have Jeff Dice, so we're going to have president of the Mises Institute. So we've had 3 of the biggest, think tanks, if you will. The presidents representing each of them come down and speak to us. So it's a great achievement. We've been breaking records when it comes to live streams. We've had the most watched non-libertarian presidential debates in the last, I don't know, like 3-4 years. You know, we have tens of thousands. Excuse me. Now I'm exaggerating. No, actually, yeah, tens of thousands of views per debate. So we've hosted the last 4 most watched libertarian debates on the internet. We started off with Augustus Invictus versus Adam Kokesh. Then we had Christopher Cantwell versus Adam Kokesh. Now we have had Walter Block for 2 debates, Walter Block versus Augustus Invictus, which I think was spectacular. And I think you guys should really check that one out, and the others as well. In our first one, Kokesh got emotional. It was kind of cool. His closing remarks with Cantwell, it was fiery. The one with Augustus and Block, even Block said himself, and I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines, this is one of the best debates he's been in. And it's, you know, they were clashing of ideas. They weren't talking over one another. It was excellent. I'll let you decide who won. Obviously, I'm a former student of Walter Block's, so anything I say might be considered bias. And then today we had the debate with Charles Peralo, which I think it's no secret. He's kind of a notorious, right? Is that fair to say?
I was going to say infamous, but okay.
Infamous, okay. Well, he is infamous. And he debated, Walter Block. And what we tried to do here is we tried to make things not only intellectually stimulating, but like entertaining. And I think we've done that with the kind of guys we bring. And if you listen, you know, people are drawn like, oh, this guy's going to be debating? No way. But in there, you know, there's some knowledge to be taken from what these individuals speak of. So that being said, I would like to thank Alexander Mask, because, come over here. Alexander Mask was pivotal in the initiation of our group, which was in 2013. So thank you so much, Alexander. You were a key part of this Rothbardian circle.
Thank you.
And this is how I can thank you. So thanks so much. And there's somebody else in this audience that I'd like to thank as well. In 2016, this individual helped me a ton, and that is Robert Fernandez. So Robert, please come out.
I saw me already one time, so.
That's true. If you'd like to say a few words, and then I'll pass it over to Robert.
I really have very little to say. I've had 3 beers.
I smell it.
So, yeah, I feel great. In the end, fuck the Fed. Have a great 2017. Yeah.
Hopefully, Mark's over. And Alex.
Well, luckily today I haven't had a drink, so that's a good sign. Yeah, it was my birthday yesterday, so yeah, that's why I haven't had, alcohol today.
You're recovering.
I want to say thank you, Louis, for bringing me on. I think the libertarian movement is growing little by little in a positive way, for the simple fact that more people are able to see these debates, take notice of what's going on, be intellectually stimulated, which before was something that was very difficult to do, unless you started reading, unless you dealt with professors like Dr. Block. The internet has created a great ambiance to be able to learn all these details. And I think people are slowly beginning to understand why we believe in what we do, and that we're here to try to educate people, not try to belittle them, or try to, make them feel, well, they're inferior to anyone else. So again, thank you guys. We appreciate you coming this evening. Everyone in the interwebs, thank you for watching. And hopefully we're going to see more on Wednesday, sorry.
Yes, Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yes. Two other organizations I'd like to thank, of course, is AFF, America's Future Foundation, namely Roger Custer and Heather. I can't pronounce her last name, so I'm not going to try. And also thanks to Loyola University. I sincerely believe it's the greatest undergraduate program for economics in the country. And it's spearheaded by Dr. Walter Block and William Barnett, of course. I think I've said this before. I think I've met a lot of. I've had been very fortunate to meet a lot of intellectuals. You know, being in libertarian circles, and to me, the most intellectually consistent, the most logical individual I've ever come across is Walter Block. So I'm very fortunate to have studied under him. I consider Bill Barnett to be the greatest macroeconomist in the country, or at least the person who teaches macroeconomics. Roger Garrison. I mean, there's guys like Stuart Wood that teach there. He was a student of Israel Kirzner. There's Nicholas Capaldi, which works for Liberty Fund. While I was there, it was Dan D'Amico. Now he's teaching at Brown. There's Leo Kreshanoff, still teaching there. John Levendes. And I owe these guys a great deal for really improving my understanding of the Austro-libertarian world. So thank you to them, and thank you all for coming. And this concludes our event. Thanks so much, guys.